If you want to get your hands on an exclusive premium hoodie, available just for the 2025 Halloween season, click the link in the description. It will only be available until Halloween. I've been with my company now for a good amount of time, I'd say probably about 6 years now. Thanks to the amount of time I've put in, I have seniority over the other associates. Not to mention, I have a lot more training and credentials under my belt than they do. The company recently picked up a new contract for some kind of big government office building. Where it's located is rather strange for it to be a government office building. I won't get into exact locations, but to give you an idea of what the area looks like and what makes it so strange, it's located in damn near the middle of nowhere. It's a giant 6-story building surrounded by a giant parking lot. The parking lot is surrounded by a metal fence that's about 10 foot tall. On the top of the fence is barbed wire. There's only one way in and one way out in front of the building at the opening of the parking lot that meets the side road it's located off of. The side road is about 3 miles away from the main road which leads to the highway. The fence is completely surrounded by woods. There are literally no buildings, houses, or any other signs of civilization for miles around. Due to my seniority, I get to work whatever shifts and days I want. Typically, I choose to work mornings or evenings and have weekends or Fridays and Saturdays off. But unfortunately, after a few months of us being at this new contract, we started having trouble keeping the overnight people. During the day, there's usually about 3 guards working all 7 days of the week. On the overnight shift during the weekdays, there's 2 guards. And on the overnight shift during the weekend, starting Friday to Sunday, there was only 1 guard. I should mention, before I go any further, that every guard is armed on every shift. As I said, we're having trouble keeping people on the overnight shift, mainly on the weekend overnight shift. Because of this, my supervisor asked me if I could help out and work some overtime on the weekend overnight shifts until they could hire more people. I could have, and in hindsight, should have said no thanks. But at the time, I actually needed the extra money because I was getting ready to move to a new apartment soon. So, I went ahead and accepted the extra shifts. The first couple of weeks were fine. No issues, nothing strange. But what happened on the 3rd weekend is what made me regret my decision for the overtime. It was a Saturday night around 2 a.m. There was a very bad thunderstorm going on outside. I was sitting in the camera control room, which is on the top floor. The control room has a window that oversees the back part of the parking lot. In the room, there's 3 large-sized computer screens that show the CCTV live feeds from all the cameras located throughout the building, as well as the few cameras that are outside in the parking lot and by the entrance exit. I was sitting in the control room doing what I normally was doing while working overnight by myself. I had the lights off, watching movies I previously downloaded on my phone while also playing games on my Game Boy. I had been sitting down for a while and got up to stretch my legs and move around a bit. I was also starting to feel a little sleepy and was thinking about going down the hall to the vending machine to grab an energy drink. After I got up and walked around the control room for a bit, stretching my legs, I went over to the window and peeked through the blinds to look outside. As I was watching, I was looking at all the heavy wind and rain blowing the random debris around. I was just about to walk away from the window to grab that energy drink when all of a sudden a flash of lightning lit up the surrounding area past the fence. And just then, I saw a figure dart from one tree to another that was a good distance from it, I'd say about 20 feet. I kept my position, looking in that direction through the blinds, waiting for another flash of lightning to see if I could see exactly what it was or if my eyes were playing tricks on me. After a couple of seconds went by, another flash struck. This time I didn't see anything near or around the tree that I saw the figure move to. At that point I thought clearly my eyes were playing tricks on me and that it was just me being tired. I left from the window and went down the hall and got the energy drink. I immediately downed the whole thing, hoping that it would kick in soon. I was finished with it by the time it took me to walk back to the control room, which wasn't long, only about 5 minutes. I got back to the control room and I immediately noticed that one of the camera feeds had been knocked out on one of the screens. It was the camera feed to the back part of the parking lot that the window overlooked. I went over to the window and looked out the blinds in the direction of the camera. I spotted it dangling in the wind from its wires from the post that it was on. I figured the heavy winds must have knocked it off somehow. I sat back at my desk and put in my report for the night and then went back to what I was originally doing. A few minutes had passed while I was watching a movie on my phone and I heard the alert sound the system gives when someone is accessing a part of the building that requires a code to be entered on a keypad. I looked at the main screen and pulled up the tab that shows the access points of the building. It showed me the one being accessed was the one in the back of the building by the back parking lot. At that point, a shiver ran down my spine as I realized someone was outside, from the shadow figure to the camera being knocked out and now to this, the keypad being accessed. Whoever it was had the code because they got in and the system showed me the green light. I thought to myself, it couldn't be another worker or security guard. If it was a worker, we would have a memo telling us who it was and what times they would be here, as well as what part of the building they would be in. I knew it wasn't a security guard because I would have known about that, too. I picked up the phone that was on my desk in an attempt to call the cops, but it was out. I looked at my phone and of course, no service. I figured the best thing to do would be to try to walk around the hallway and try to get service on my phone. I left out of the control room and into the hallway. I started walking down the hallway toward the service stairwell while looking at my phone, hoping to get a signal soon. Just then, as I was looking down at my phone, the power was shut off. I immediately decided, since I was so close to the stairs, that I was going to run down the stairs to the front lobby and run out the door to my truck. I got to the stairwell and opened it up. It was damn near pitch black in there. I decided to use the darkness to my advantage and walk quietly down the steps. I figured if this person cut the power, they had to be in the generator room, which was in the basement. Unfortunately, the basement was the only flight of steps below the lobby where I was headed. Also, the generator was not too far away from the stairwell that I was in. I made it down to the 4th floor and suddenly I heard a door open at the bottom of the stairwell. I stopped dead in my tracks. At this point, I knew I was armed, but I was thinking to myself, even though I went through training, I don't think I was ready to shoot anyone. I was hoping and praying that it wouldn't come to that. As I was standing there immersed in my thoughts about my training with my firearm, I started hearing heavy footsteps walking up the stairs. I wasted no time in coming up with a new plan. I was going to turn around and walk as quickly and quietly back up the steps as possible to the 6th floor where I came from. At the top of the steps, a few feet past the door still in the stairwell, there's a ladder that leads up to the hatch that leads to the roof of the building. I was going to climb up the ladder to the top, just before you have to open the hatch to go any further, and just hide in there in the pitch black darkness until whatever happens next. I turned around, and just as I did, my gun banged against the metal to the stairwell railing, making a loud clang sound. As that happened, I froze, and so did the heavy footsteps. A few seconds had gone by and then I heard whoever it was running as fast as they could up the steps. I sprang as fast as I could, running up the steps as if my life depended on it. As I got to the top of the steps, just before I was about to pass the door I had come from, I had an idea to create a diversion on the fly. I quickly opened up the door hard and loud, then let go of the handle and let it close and slam on its own. I continued to run to the ladder and climb up it. By doing that, I would make it appear that I had run out the door. With only seconds to spare, I made it up the ladder. The man, distracted by the door tactic, opened it without even looking in my direction. He ran into the hall, the heavy door closing behind him. That's when I saw my chance. I leapt down from the ladder, only about 10 feet high, landing with a loud thud as my feet hit the floor. I bolted for the stairs. The man must have heard the sound because I had barely made it down one flight before I heard the door open again and his footsteps pounding down after me. Both of us were sprinting as fast as we could. I managed to stay one floor ahead of him the entire way. When I reached the lobby, luck was suddenly on my side. Behind me, I heard a loud crashing noise followed by a cry of pain. I wasn't certain, but I think the man had tripped and fallen on the stairs. I wasn't about to wait around to confirm. I burst through the door, ran straight for the entrance, and used my key to unlock it. Fortunately, I always parked my truck close by. With the wind howling and the rain pouring down, I hit the fob to start the engine and unlocked the doors as I sprinted across the lot. I jumped into the truck, threw it in reverse, and just then caught sight of him, dressed all in black, his face covered by a mask and hood, bursting out of the building and charging toward my car. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it, tires screeching as I tore out of the lot and onto the side road. It wasn't until I was nearly at the main road that I got a signal on my phone. I immediately called the police. They arrived about 15 minutes later and I followed them back to the building. I told them everything, filling out reports for both them and my company. We searched the entire building and surrounding area, but found nothing. The scariest part came when they checked the stairwell. Apparently, when the man had fallen, he dropped something. The police recovered a fully loaded, unregistered semi-automatic handgun. To this day, no one knows why someone would have broken into that building. There was nothing particularly special about it, except that it was government property. Whatever the case, I'm just thankful that luck was on my side that night. I used to work nights as a security guard in a medium-sized corporate office building in New Jersey. And for the most part, the nights were boring, quiet, and uneventful. Which is why what happened one night has stuck with me so vividly for years. It started around midnight after the last employees had left the building and the lobby was empty except for me. Just me and the glow of the security monitors. My job was simple. Check cameras, make a couple of patrol rounds, log any incidents, and mostly just sit and watch for anything unusual. That night, I was going through my usual routine, scanning the screens for the elevators, the hallways, and the underground parking garage, when I noticed a figure moving between the cars on the lower garage feed, which immediately caught my attention because the lot should have been completely empty at this hour. Only people with 24-hour access could get in, and I knew no one had it at that moment. At first, I thought it might have been one of the late shift IT guys or maybe a cleaning crew member, but it didn't make sense since cleaning crews had left hours before and the guy wasn't carrying any equipment or wearing a uniform. He was wearing a long dark coat that looked a little oversized, and he wasn't heading to any particular car or toward the exit. He just moved slowly, weaving around the rows like he was inspecting the area or making sure no one was around. And something about the way he moved gave me the chills. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was off. I called the supervisor and explained what I was seeing. And he told me to stay at my post and keep an eye on the cameras, which I did, but my gut told me I needed to check it in person. So, I grabbed my flashlight and headed down to the garage. The elevator ride was long, slow, and every floor that passed seemed to echo in the shaft, making me more on edge than I cared to admit. When the doors opened on the garage level, I scanned the lot with my flashlight, and it was empty, completely quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes every little creak of the building sound huge. I called out, "Hello, security here." But the echo returned empty, and I didn't hear any reply. I walked slowly down the rows of cars, shining light into every dark corner, every space between vehicles, but there was nothing there. Not a single shadow, not a single person. My pulse was racing and I started to doubt myself, thinking maybe the camera was malfunctioning, or maybe it had picked up a shadow that wasn't really there. So, I went back upstairs to the lobby trying to shake it off. But as soon as I sat back down and looked at the garage feed again, there he was, standing in the exact same spot, as if he hadn't moved since I had been there. And now my stomach dropped because I knew I had just been there. And there was no way he could have gotten back into the same spot unnoticed unless he had been watching me, or worse, waiting for me. I radioed my supervisor again, telling him I was going to keep watching the cameras, and he told me not to approach him unless absolutely necessary, which was easier said than done because I couldn't stop staring at him and my mind was already running through every possible scenario. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him wander slowly toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. He moved carefully, pausing, looking over his shoulder like he was checking for someone, and then disappeared from the camera just before reaching the door, which made my stomach knot. I checked every other feed. Hallways, elevator lobbies, even the rooftop access. And there was nothing. No trace of him at all, which only made me feel worse because it was impossible for him to vanish that fast. And it gave me the sinking feeling that he had access to the building somehow, or he was hiding in a way that I couldn't see. I stayed at my desk, heart pounding, until the elevator dinged and opened in the lobby. Nobody was inside, but on the polished floor, I noticed wet footprints leading from the elevator out into the main lobby. Bare feet, which was wrong on so many levels because it was freezing outside and he would have had to taken his shoes off just to wander barefoot. I froze in my tracks, realizing that if he was inside the building now, he could be anywhere. And every unlocked office or storage room was a potential hiding spot. I called the local off-site patrol for backup and debated locking myself in the lobby, but something in me told me I needed to do a patrol and confirm the situation, which in retrospect was probably a mistake. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and started walking the hallway slowly, flashlight in hand, scanning every office door, checking for movement. Every creak of the building made me jump. Halfway down the hall, I saw one of the office doors slightly ajar, which shouldn't have been possible because it was always locked at night. I pushed it open with my flashlight peering inside, but the room was empty except for a sleeping computer monitor and a chair pushed in under the desk. Nothing else. I stepped out into the hall again and froze because I heard the sound of footsteps on the tile behind me. Not mine. Heavy, wet, and uneven, moving fast towards me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I swung my flashlight around the hall, catching a glimpse of the dark coat at the end of the hallway. He wasn't running, but he was walking fast with a purpose. And it hit me that he had been following me the entire time, hiding just out of sight whenever I checked the cameras. I bolted, sprinting down the hall toward the stairwell, barely noticing the handrail slamming against my arm as I rushed past. The footsteps followed close enough that I could hear them clearly now, echoing in the hall. And I realized I had no idea how he had gotten inside. No idea what he wanted, and the panic was almost suffocating. I dove into the stairwell, sliding down a few steps, and slammed the door behind me as the footsteps thundered on the floor above. Then they stopped abruptly and I sat there shaking for several minutes trying to catch my breath and convincing myself I had imagined it. But the sound of my own breathing and the echo of those steps made me feel insane. When the patrol finally arrived, I was pale, sweaty, and trembling. We walked the building together floor by floor, room by room, and the garage was completely empty. No sign of the intruder, no footprints, nothing. And when we checked the cameras, the footage from the time he appeared had been overwritten or corrupted, leaving a gap in the recording that made my skin crawl even more. I quit that job within a month. Partly because of the fear and partly because I couldn't handle walking the hallways alone anymore. Especially when the garage was empty and the wind outside made the building creak, because every shadow and every noise reminded me of him walking behind me just out of sight waiting. Even years later, I get anxious in parking garages or office buildings at night, and I still check over my shoulder more than I should, thinking I might see that long coat rounding a corner, hearing those wet footsteps behind me again. And I know that what I experienced wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a faceless ghost or a phantom. It was a real person, a stalker. And the thought that he had been inside the building following me, hiding just out of view, and that I might never know how he got in or what he wanted is something that still haunts me every time I think about that night. Music. This happened to me a few days ago. As a matter of fact, it was my first night of training as a mobile security guard. Before I tell you my story, just want to clarify that a mobile security guard is primarily a security guard that drives around in the vehicle and does site visitation where the client needs security. In this case, it's the GTA of Toronto, but this incident took place at a nearby pharmacy med clinic in Mississauga. It was my first night as a trainee, and my supervisor was a nice person showing me around on how to conduct patrols, write reports, disarm fire alarms, etc. Usually, if an alarm occurs, dispatch notifies us through the radio and asks us to attend the site where the alarm is happening. However, we arrived at the medical clinic in Mississauga to conduct a regular perimeter patrol, which also meant there was no alarm. We arrived on the site around 1:15 a.m. to make sure everything was normal. But as we got out of the vehicle and approached the building, something was terribly wrong. For one, the underground parking garage was left open, and two, the front door of the building was busted open. My supervisor then said, how is this possible? If somebody broke in, the alarm should be on. I did not know how to react to this as this was my first time at the site. And according to my supervisor, this was a new contract that the security company I work for got. We stepped in the building cautiously. But all of a sudden, my supervisor says, "Look at the elevator. It's going up at different levels." Sure enough, he was not kidding. As the elevator was moving from G1, 2, 3, and stopped at level 4, which was the very top, I asked my supervisor if he thinks someone was in here. He immediately nods and pulls out his baton. At that very moment, I was feeling sick to my stomach and started breathing heavily. At that point, I hated my job and did not want to be there. We immediately went inside the elevator and went straight to the top level. I was getting a bad feeling and some adrenaline was rushing through my body before the elevator door was about to open. As we were going up each level, I was thinking to myself what if something happens or whoever this person or thing is might not leave without a fight and possibly even charge at us as the elevator door opens. However, luckily, as we arrived at the 4th floor, no one was in front of us, but it was extremely dark. Therefore, we turned on the lights and started investigating the rooms of that floor. My supervisor told me to stick with him as even he was feeling uncomfortable. He said, I quote, "Make sure you stick with me and get ready to bust this fuck." Luckily, no one was there. So, we were very shocked and didn't know what was happening until we heard footsteps going down the stairwell. My supervisor and I were about to open the door to the stairs and chase whoever it was inside. However, just then the footsteps stopped and it was very quiet. We could only hear each other's breathing. What my supervisor said next to dispatch is something I will never forget and still is rattling around in my head. A4, call Seath 25. Go ahead. Dispatch, we need immediate backup. Please be advised someone's in the building with us and they're hiding downstairs, possibly armed and waiting for us to come towards them so he or they can ambush us. Dispatch then tells us to stay where we are and not approach the suspect or whoever it was downstairs as backup will be arriving shortly. At that point, my supervisor started panicking and it just made the situation even worse. I mean, he should be the one to lead and not feel worried. But then again, I don't blame him, as this experience was overwhelming and horrifying for me. Now, my supervisor is only a couple of years older than me, so I preferably call him bro instead of sir or whatever. Bro, just don't worry. I'm sure backup will be arriving shortly, I told him. You might be wondering why we could not hit the exit and run for it. Well, you see, the suspect is on the ground floor, which means he could be anywhere. So, with the elevator making noises, he or she could be alarmed and immediately stand in front of the elevator, blocking our way. The suspect could approach us by coming upstairs, but I guess that he or they figured we could attack him by surprise. So maybe that's why he was quietly waiting at the corner for us downstairs. 15 minutes later, we heard the door open. It was our senior supervisor, and his voice echoed out, "Security." My supervisor radioed him and said, "Sir, we're upstairs. Be careful. There's someone downstairs." A few minutes later, the senior supervisor met us upstairs and told us to come investigate with him. Therefore, we did. But we looked everywhere downstairs and then each floor and found no one. As we were at the third floor, scanning each room and bathroom to see if the person was there, we heard the front door open and heard footsteps running outside. We were not fast enough to see who it was, because by the time we got to the ground floor, the suspect was gone. Both my supervisor and I were in shock because we looked everywhere and did not find anyone. Either that person was in a very good hiding spot or that medical clinic center was haunted. I don't think I'll ever know. But this was by far the most horrific experience of my life. And coming this weekend, I'll be there again for site visitation, but this time alone, as I'll be trained by then.